Hello everybody and welcome to the Thursday edition of Video Clips. And today I want to talk about Leonardo da Vinci. And you might think, on a health network, why are we talking about Leonardo da Vinci? Well, I think you'll get it pretty soon here. So in May, just last month, the world celebrated the 500th anniversary of Leonardo da Vinci's death. Most news outlets and organizations celebrated him as a genius with a remarkable curiosity that led him to explore so many areas like science, math, architecture, engineering, geography, map making, sculpture and painting. And he's most known probably for art. Two of his paintings are some of the most famous in the world, the Mona Lisa and the Last Supper. Da Vinci's notes on the issues he explored are preserved in books and over 7,000 loose sheets, which are held in libraries around the world and are in private collections that are owned by people like Bill Gates. Along with his sketches and paintings, Leonardo's notes and papers are now receiving a lot of attention, all in conjunction with the 500th anniversary. People are very interested in all things Leonardo. According to biographer Walter Isaacson, by the way, if you've never read a Walter Isaacson book, I strongly recommend it. He's a fascinating guy. Da Vinci helped to invent the scientific method, stating hypotheses and then disproving and revising them through continued observation and experimentation. One of Da Vinci's major contributions to the world was his study of anatomy. So he teamed up with this Marcantonio della Torre, university professor, and the two of them performed dissections and they studied cadavers in order to determine how legs bent and muscles contracted and various organs functioned. The two developed drawings of the human body, and they organized a huge amount of data into an instructional manual which still has some relevance today. And just by way of example, Gray's Anatomy was published in 1858, and based on this book, for over 100 years, medical students were taught that the mesentery, a structure that connects the small and large intestines to the back of the abdomen, was comprised of several separate structures. But only a few years ago, this is pretty recent, J. Calvin Coffey, chair of surgery at the University of Limerick's Medical School in Ireland, started to suspect that the mesentery was one continuous organ rather than several pieces. This turned out to be true, and Coffey was astounded when he found out that in one of Da Vinci's drawings he portrayed it exactly that way, 500 years ago. Coffey now credits Da Vinci with this discovery in his scientific presentations. So 500 years ago, working from cadavers, Da Vinci knew things that we're just finding out. Leonardo also provided the first description of atherosclerosis in medical history after dissecting the body of a 100-year-old man. He conducted research on heart valves and how they worked using a glass model of the aortic valve that allowed him to examine how blood flowed and how the valves opened and closed. His observations about the process were confirmed in the 1960s and continue to guide the way valves are repaired and replaced today. So again, 500 years ago. Leonardo used the information that he learned in doing all of his research to write anatomy books and creating his art. And one of the advantages that it gave him is that, unlike a lot of painters of the day, he knew exactly which nerves and muscles caused furrowing of the brows and smiling, for example. And his work is known in part for the fact that the people that he painted appeared to have significant emotional depth as a result of this knowledge. And again, very few painters of the day had this type of information. Well, I think there are a lot of reasons to celebrate his genius. But another group has put forth a different view of Leonardo da Vinci and his accomplishments. According to an article in a neurology journal, Leonardo da Vinci, if he were alive today, would qualify for a diagnosis of ADHD. I laughed out loud when I saw this because I thought it was a joke, but then I read the article and they were really serious about it. To justify their observations, the authors report that during his adolescence, Da Vinci left his hometown and moved to Florence to work under the direction of Andrea Verrocchio, who was much like him interested in a lot of different things. And while he was there, he was awarded projects because of his father's connections, but he never started some of them and some were never completed. Now, I guess the first thing I thought is he was an adolescent when this happened, and I don't know about you, but I've heard of adolescents before not finishing things they started. I mean, I don't know that that qualifies for a diagnosis of anything other than just being a teenager. According to the article, Matteo Bandello watched Da Vinci paint The Last Supper and reported that he often alternated between working on the painting and at the same time working on a clay model of a horse, and sometimes he would go back and forth between the two projects and just tap the paintbrush on a couple of the figures in the painting and then walk away and do something else. He was apparently just easily distracted. But he ultimately did finish the painting, as you know, because it is one of the most famous paintings in the world. But many of his pieces, to give some credit to what the article says, were never finished, and many of the things he started didn't get finished too. The authors report that his procrastination and difficulties with time management started in childhood, which they describe as, quote, a fundamental characteristic of the ADHD condition. They also report that he was constantly on the go, keeping himself occupied with doing something, but often jumping from task to task. They also claim that he, like many people with ADHD, did not sleep a lot and worked night and day with short naps. And for the record, I have to tell you, Thomas Edison was like this too. People like Thomas Edison and Da Vinci, they're what you call short sleepers, and there have been books written about this. There's nothing wrong with them. They're short sleepers, they don't require a lot of sleep, and they often cycle through days just catnapping. I'm a little bit like a short sleeper. I don't require much sleep, and I don't know, I don't think I have ADHD. It seems like I'm able to complete things and get a lot done. But in any case, I don't think that this is a disorder, but they certainly painted it that way. The authors also report that Da Vinci was left-handed and that there were some signs that he had dyslexia, further contributing to his attention difficulties. They state that left-handed people are more likely to become musicians and artists, and dyslexics have superior mental imagery and 3D visualization of objects. These factors most likely contributed to his superior artistry, even though he was clearly impaired. While acknowledging that Da Vinci was, quote, accomplished more than any other human being could possibly dream of in a lifespan, the authors ponder how much more he could have accomplished and gotten done if he wasn't plagued, they use that term, with ADHD. Well, I find the idea that something is wrong with Leonardo an interesting contrast to what he did actually accomplish during his lifetime. In other words, I'm sure that when I die, and I hope I have a good enough 30-some more years to irritate people with some of my commentary, but I'm sure that when I die I will not have finished everything I started. But Leonardo finished a lot of things, even though he didn't finish everything he started. And just a few of them, I went online and started looking, because there is so much information out there because of the 500th anniversary of his death. And this is a short list. I mean, this video clip would be 2.5 hours long if I read you the whole thing. And by the way, I read Walter Isaacson's biography of Leonardo da Vinci when it came out. It was quite some time ago. But the book is like this thick. His life was so interesting. It's 500 pages. So anyway, here are just a few of the things. As an engineer, he is credited with inventing the strut bridge, the rolling mill, and the lens grinding machine. He developed a design for a tank that was later built and actually used during World War I. In 1495, he developed a design for a robot which could sit, stand, turn its head, cross its arms, and lift its visor. A NASA scientist was able to build it in 2002 from Da Vinci's notes. He developed a workable design for a diving suit that would allow divers to stay underwater. It was the precursor to what we actually use for divers today. He designed the earliest known parachute. He developed the first known drawing of a helicopter-like machine. He designed the miter lock, which is used on canals all over the world. He designed the multi-barrel shotgun. All right, so most likely, if in spite of all this, if I've just had this visualization in my mind, if Da Vinci had lived during the late 20th, early 21st century, his parents would have been contacted by the school to report that he was not paying attention in class. And his parents might have then reported to the pediatrician, well, we have problems with him at home too. He seems to have boundless energy and he doesn't sleep much at night. And sometimes he plays with Legos, coloring books, and 5 other toys at the same time. There's a high likelihood, I think, that poor Leonardo would have been drugged. And according to, by the way, Dr. Joseph Biederman, he's a psychiatrist at Harvard University, and this is a quote that he gave to the New York Times: if a child is brilliant but is doing just okay in school, that child may need treatment which would result in their performing brilliantly at school. And Biederman is talking about drugging children like Leonardo da Vinci. So Leonardo's parents would have been told that his treatment was based on the findings of the best child psychiatrists at Harvard. A little frightening, yes? Well, instead of thinking about how much Leonardo could have done if he hadn't had ADHD, maybe we might want to think about how much less he might have gotten done if he were drugged. And maybe we should be asking ourselves how many Leonardos are being diagnosed and drugged today. So anyway, I thought that this was interesting, first of all, because I was not aware that so much of what Leonardo da Vinci had painted in terms and drawn in the anatomy books was so relevant, and that later discoveries, 500 years later, we're still discovering that things that he drew were so accurate. But I also think that this article about his ADHD condition just goes to, of all the things to write about this guy, seriously, this is the thing you want to focus on, and you honestly think that his life could have been more productive if he didn't have ADHD? I'm beginning to think that ADHD, to a certain extent, for people who function well, I'm not talking about people or children who don't function well, but to a certain extent, it may be the thing that allows people to have lots of interests and pursue outside the box ways of solving problems and that sort of thing. And I guess, again, I would ask the question in closing this out, maybe we should be concerned about the future geniuses of our society that are being diagnosed and drugged today. All right, that's all for today and all for the week. Hit the subscribe button if you're not a subscriber, and of course pass this on to anybody who you think would enjoy watching it, and I'll be back to you next week with more news.